Each and every single month, we typically do a VIP video Q&A for all the Skills Accelerator members at hockeytraining.com. But this month, we accidentally sent the question form to the entire email list. So I'm gonna convert it into a YouTube video so I can help all of you who sent questions out this month. All right, let's just get right into this thing here because a lot of awesome questions came in. How will the in-season 21 plan be formatted? It's pretty natural to not know many details yet because it's not released yet. The in-season 21 programming for youth and adults is gonna be available August 30th. I'll give you a breakdown on how it's gonna look, okay? Your programming is encompassing what we've deemed the fresh factor, which is a combination of certain type of workouts. Explosive strength sessions, accelerate performance sessions, bulletproof armor sessions, in-season skill work, Haki Yoga, and your game day domination package. So there's a lot going on in the air when it comes to your workout selection, but the way in which I've programmed it this year is like a systemless system in that I provide you workouts for each and every single phase, but you're able to schedule your week based exactly on your schedule. If you've got dry land team workouts, if you've got on ice practice, you've got your on ice games, you've got traveling, if you've got tournaments, if you're doing camps, if you're doing all of these things, the in-season program that we've created this year is 100% adaptable to any schedule. And that makes it one of the best programs we've ever created for in-season here at Hockey Training, because programs don't always get results if you can't follow them. Right? Programs don't get results. Programs you can follow consistently get results because biology always responds to adaptations over time. So how essentially the in-season program is set up is you're gonna first check off your explosive strength sessions. Your explosive strength sessions are a combination of plyometric work and hockey-specific resistance training. This checks a lot of boxes because we're training power and power endurance with our plyometric training, but we're also training our functional strength with the resistance training movements, which help towards injury prevention, shot power, staying strong on the puck, speed, agility, you name it. This session really covers it all and is what most athletes would refer to as your typical functionally specific resistance work. So we're doing more intense type of movements. After that, you're going to want to schedule in your Accelerate Performance training session. Now, Accelerate Performance is as hockey specific as a workout gets. You're going to be doing 8 exercises, XLR8. That 8 is there for a purpose. 2 ankle movements, 2 hip movements, 2 speed movements, 2 technique movements. Each of these are all supersets. So you're going to superset those ankle, hip, speed, and technique structures, and you're going to rest 60 seconds in between sets. But the rest is kind of a rest here because you'll be doing aerobic movements during your rest periods as opposed to doing nothing at all. We're doing this because it implements what's known as cardio acceleration training. It's a popular training method that originated in 2008 from some really excellent research that was done in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning, where you can perform specific movements, whether exercise-based or skill-based, so that you can do strength and conditioning rather than strength than conditioning. The research was absolutely fantastic. The way in which you structure the workout, there were 2 groups. There was group 1 that did resistance training and then 30 minutes of cardio, and group 2 did resistance training but incorporated 30 minutes of cardio within the rest periods. At the end of the study, the group that incorporated cardio within the rest periods built more muscle, lost more fat, and actually improved their interset recovery due to an improved work capacity and conditioning. So this is an excellent method to use during the in-season, and it makes it that much more hockey specific that you're combining it with the 4 supersets that we're doing. So you can think of the explosive strength sessions as your functional strength and power and anaerobic conditioning. And then you can think about the accelerate sessions as your movement quality and aerobic capacity. So we're getting anaerobic and aerobic work done, and both are training functional specific strength training movements in different modalities so that we're providing the body a different stimulus, creating a more complete hockey player. The Bulletproof armor circuit that I discussed, that is in place for movement quality and injury prevention. Hence, Bulletproof armor. I want to make you bulletproof all in season long. And the origination of the method that I'm utilizing for the Bulletproof armor circuits was originally coined by Gray Cook and his joint-by-joint approach. He's a physiotherapist, and he essentially looks at the body as a stack of joints, and for each joint, you're going to provide a certain exercise to give that joint what it needs. Ankle mobility, knee stability, hip mobility, lumbar spine stability, thoracic mobility. You're going to move up and down the kinetic chain and provide exact exercises for the exact joint structures that we can use to help keep you bulletproof out in the ice. Essentially, when you give the joint what it needs to perform optimally, your movement quality then becomes optimal. And when movement is optimal, nothing's holding you back on the ice. I call it a performance anchor. If you have a disruption or an inefficiency in your movement mechanics, it's like tying a rope around your waist and skating out on the ice with an anchor. The Bulletproof armor circuit is there to cut that performance anchor off so that you don't have any movement inefficiencies. But because, as a byproduct, you don't have inefficiencies, you are that much more resistant to injuries because the joints are doing the roles that they're supposed to be doing. All right? Fun little benefit of that is you also get some aerobic conditioning stimulus out of it as well. So we've got our explosive strength work, our accelerate work, and our Bulletproof armor circuit. Next, we'll be moving into Haki Yoga. Quite self-explanatory: balance, coordination, stability, reduction in inflammation, improvement in sleep quality, improvement in breathing mechanics to help you stay more patient with the puck and calm during the hot moments out in the ice. And last but not least, we've got our skill work. We've got skill sessions, and those are also built right into the game day domination package, where you're going to be doing edge work specific sessions on game day and game day only to really optimize performance out in the ice. We're utilizing a release and activate type of technology. I can't wait for you guys to check it out. It's going to be huge for your ability to contract the coordination systems and muscle fibers responsible for elite skating. And our Haki Yoga work, I think I've covered it all at this point in time. So when you ask me how it's going to be structured, it's structured utilizing those workouts, but then you put those workouts where you want to perform them throughout the week. And utilizing delayed adaptation, it's something you can use in sports science, that where you can train something, say a Monday this week, and then not train that again until Wednesday next week, but still get 100% of the benefits. That's why I call it a systemless system. You're essentially switching things around based on your schedule, but getting the results as if you weren't. And that type of adaptability is perfect for the in-season when you are moving, when you're traveling, game schedule. This is a perfect situation where no matter what your schedule looks like, you can still train like an NHL player. And that was my exact aim with this. And I think you also asked the question here, how does it change from phase to phase? Yeah, how does it, you asked how does the workout change from week to week? So you don't want to change too much week to week. In terms of providing an overload stimulus for continued progression throughout the in-season, that's done through block training. So block 1 is phase 1 and 2, block 2 is phases 3 and 4, and block 3 is phases 5 and 6. In terms of providing overload and variation so that A, you continue to make adaptations all in season long and get better, but B, there's enough variation in there so that you don't get any repetitive injury strains. We're utilizing intensity as our prime overload method for block 1. We're utilizing time under tension as our prime overload method for block 2. And we're utilizing density as our prime overload method for block 3. So that kind of gives you an inside look as to what this next program is going to look like and why it is completely covering every last aspect of hockey-specific performance. But for more information on this, I did do a video on it in the Hockey Science Unleashed channel. It's called the Fresh Factor, because everything I just discussed accumulates the one method that we're coining as the Fresh Factor, because it helps not just keep you fresh all game long, but it's going to help keep you fresh all season long, because everything's adaptable and continually progressing at the exact rate we want to throughout the season. Next question: what is the best way to overcome a lower back injury, i.e. recurring muscle spasms and pulls? What exercises to avoid and what exercises to focus on? Thank you, Coach Dan. You're very welcome, my man. So What exercises? So with a low back injury, it's kind of tough, right? Because I'm not a licensed physiotherapist, and injury rehabilitation is very hands-on. It's important to know someone's injury history. It's important to know someone's current active range of motion. It's important to know how the injury occurred to begin with. There's a lot of things that are important for the context of the situation that impact the protocol for the situation. However, I don't really want to just leave you hanging here. So I'll go back to what I talked about in the Bulletproof Armor Circuit. The Bulletproof Armor Circuit looks at the body as a stack of joints, okay? Ankles, knees, hips, lumbar spine, thoracic spine, shoulder girdle, cervical spine. When you look at the body as a stack of joints, you start to understand a cool pattern. Ankles prioritize mobility. Knees are there for stability. Hips prioritize mobility. The lumbar spine is there for stability. The thoracic spine for mobility. You start to see a very natural and common sense relationship from one joint to the next, because you can't have mobile or else it wouldn't be stable enough for proper locomotion, either athletically or non-athletically. So the body alternates its priorities from mobility to stability. And the way in which you identify where injuries came from depends a lot on this. Like, for example, the knee, it's like a door hinge, right? The knee, it's kind of like the elbow. The knee, all it does is flex and extend. The ankle is very mobile. It has a lot of rotary movement. It has eversion and inversion. It has all kinds of different mechanics that it can do that the knee can never even dream about doing. But the problem that happens is if some people, they'll get a knee injury and they'll be like, what kind of knee protocol, what can I do? How can I strengthen the knee? What kind of knee movements can I do? I understand where they're thinking, because they have the idea that where it hurts must be the problem. But one thing I can tell you about helping athletes out with injury is where it hurts is usually not the problem, and instead is usually the result of the problem. Let's make sense of that. Let's say the ankle is totally immobile. Well, if the ankle is immobile, well, then the knee is going to have to try and provide some mobility for the ankle for proper locomotion to occur as a compensation mechanism. So if the ankle is immobile, well, then you're going to have to ask the knee to do some form of mobility that's not its primary task. What happens when you ask a door hinge to be mobile? It breaks, okay? In the physiology world, you're gonna get inflammation in the knee. You could get a ligament or tendon issue. You could have patellofemoral syndrome. There's a lot of things that can continue to crop up when you ask a joint to do something that it wasn't designed to do. So someone will have a knee injury and want to do all the knee protocols in the world, yet if they fix their ankle mobility, that problem would have completely solved itself. Hence, when we kind of bring this full circle, you've got lumbar spine problems. You've got low back pain, you told me. Well, let's work our way up the chain. Ankles, responsible for mobility. Knees, responsible for stability. Hips, responsible for mobility. Lumbar spine, responsible for stability. So if the lumbar spine, which is responsible for stability, is in pain, maybe it's in pain because it's being forced to provide some mobility that the hips aren't currently offering. Exact same analogy from ankle to knee, but now for you, it's from hip to low back. So in a lot of cases, if somebody doesn't have mobile hips, their body, as a compensation mechanism, it's not on purpose, it's a compensation for optimal locomotion of working with your current physiologic structure, it will ask your lumbar spine to be mobile. Your lumbar spine is supposed to be as mobile as this, okay? There's no mobility happening in that tree trunk that is a lumbar spine. It's not the thoracic spine. When I do this, that is 100% my thoracic spine. The lumbar spine is locked in there because its prime role is stability. So in your case, if you've got a lot of low back pain, one of my first areas for diagnostics would be to assess your hip mobility. If your hip mobility is not optimal, then you're asking your lumbar spine to do something that it's not designed to do. So instead of looking and asking me for a bunch of low back exercises, I would be asking you, what are you doing with your hips? All right? That would be diagnostic area number one that I would want to explore with you. But diagnostic area number two would actually be strength-based. When you look at, from a functional anatomy perspective, the role of the core, what does it do? It stabilizes the spine, it stabilizes the pelvis. Those are its prime roles. It is stabilizing and protecting the spine and pelvis. However, if you don't have a strong and stable enough core, well, then your joint structures are going to have to provide stability for it. Hence, the same kind of idea occurs. If your core isn't strong and stable, well, then you're going to have to ask your joints to provide that stability for you where your muscles lacked. That becomes a problem because your joints can only provide so much stability during high velocity movement like hockey. Hockey's high impact enough. We need to be strong enough to stabilize our own tissues so that the tissues don't have to stabilize themselves, because over time they're going to get inflamed. So I guess my three-step process for you would be, number one, see a physiotherapist. That hands-on stuff is irreplaceable here. But number two, I'd be looking at hip mobility. And number three, I'd be doing core stability. We've got tons of hip mobility stuff on our channels and within all the programs here at hockeytraining.com. It's one of the biggest things for better edge work and specifically stride frequency. And I'd be looking at core strength and stability, but more specifically inner core and anti-rotary exercises. Things like different plank variations, plank with shoulder taps, renegade row, the Palloff press. These will all be great movements for you to do. Okay? So that'd be the three-step process that I'd take in that situation. Let's move on to the next question here and see what we got. Hey, Coach Dan. So for the last 2 weeks, I've been in hockey camps. We had on-ice and off-ice training every day, so I had to get off the off-season Youth 21 program so I can recover. Now that camp is over, should I jump back to where I left before the camp in my program? And for proper peaking, should I have phase 7 of my off-season the week before tryouts? Thanks for everything. Yeah, I mean, inside the members area, it teaches you how to periodize your entire off-season schedule. So don't throw phase 7 there if it didn't belong there. But if you did have phase 7 the week before tryouts, then 100%. The phase 7 is built for tapering and peaking. It's a beautiful way to get the job done. Just don't forget to still take 2 to 3 days off before tryouts, because you still want that optimal nervous system, muscular system, and connective tissue recovery before you enter the ice. So even if you're on phase 7, still take 2 to 3 days off before tryouts start to get that full recovery. And as far as your other question, should I just jump back to where I left off before the camp in my program? Yes. Hop right back on it. That's where you should be, because that's where you're currently at in your periodization. You don't want to skip too far ahead until you've earned it. Phasic training, one phase always builds upon the next, and you want to make sure you follow that pattern for the proper linear progression of the overload stimulus that I'm giving you guys throughout the entire off season. Next question. I was involved in a serious bicycle accident recently. I'm following the prescribed concussion protocols that I was given by the neurologist, and I can start exercising again this week. Awesome. I was on phase 4 of Men's League Domination 2021. Should I start where I left off or ease into it with another one of your programs? I've mentioned this before. I truly believe in all your training methods. Thank you again for all you do for the game. Well, thank you, man. It's people like you that allow people like me to do what I love for a living. So thank you for submitting your questions and for all of your support. As far as your question goes, you're asking me, should I essentially use another program to work my way back into MLD 21? I'll answer this in a way in which, what would I do, okay? If I got in a bicycle accident and I had concussion problems and I wanted to get back in the gym because I love training, which I do, that's what I live for, what would I do in this situation? I would get right back into MLD 21. I really would, and here's why. So you just underwent something chaotic, right? Concussions, bike injury, all just getting cleared for exercise now, that's chaos, right? Adding a new plan that you've never done before, I feel like is adding chaos on top of chaos. For me, I would want something predictable, okay? This is the one thing that I can control because you're already on phase 4, right? You're familiar with the sets, reps, and rest periods. You're familiar with the exercise selection. You're familiar with the flow and time of the workout. You're familiar with the range of motion required. You're familiar with all the weights, weight selection that you like to use for each exercise. So instead of adding new, which would be chaos, a lot of new learning, even when you're healthy, starting a new program is kind of a big undertaking, and there's a learning process that happens for 2 to 4 weeks. Chaos, I wouldn't do that. You're already chaotic, so I would actually do something I can control. So instead of using something different to ease back into the MLD program, I would use the MLD program to ease back into the MLD program. I would simply start where I left off. You're in phase 4. What I would do, I would get back into the gym, use less weights, like 50% less weights than I know I can control, and probably 50% less sets too, because we're rebuilding our confidence right now. So if something was 4 sets of 8 and I used 200 pounds, I'd probably do 2 sets of 8 with 100 pounds. 50% of the weight, 50% of the sets. Do that for a week and see how you feel. I think that you're gonna have much more success getting back into the ebb and flow of doing something you're familiar with at a less intensity rather than doing something you're unfamiliar with at an unknown intensity because it's new, all right? Just my 2 cents. I hope that totally makes sense for you. But again, you could talk to a physiotherapist as well. It sounds like you underwent something pretty serious. Next question. Hey, I'm 12 years old. How many hours of training do you think I need to be the best? 12 years old, how many hours of training do you need to be the best? So I love the motivation and enthusiasm. I love it, but it's difficult for a guy like me to answer this question without context because I don't know your current technical skill. I don't know your current speed, agility, and conditioning. I don't know what access to equipment you have. I don't know if you've run any training programs before. I don't know what your actual goals are at this moment in time. There's just a lot I don't know in order to give this a truly accurate answer, okay? So I'm gonna have to put out that disclaimer and then I guess broad paintbrush 4 to 6 hours a week. I think if you're a serious hockey player, you would be putting in 4 to 6 hours per week. But even the way in which you ask the question, I almost want to reword it because I'm trying to identify what's going on here. Because you said how many hours a week should I do? 20 hours of bad training is worse than 5 hours of good training. So I don't think in quantity. Think in quality. I would way rather you do 3 hours of a real hockey training program than 10 hours of some old school coach telling you to run hills and do suicide runs because it builds mental toughness. Like that stuff is nonsense. So I would say if you want to be the best, and when you ask me that, what do I have to do to be the best? Just be the best that you can be. Your goal should always not be to be the best in the room, but just to be better than you were yesterday. This is about reaching our own personal potential. And the way in which you do that is 4 to 6 hours per week on a real program and not just clock in and clock out hours of exercise. Next question. Did I skip over one? No, I didn't. Okay. My 13-year-old son has been doing the off-season 21 program, but with vaccinations, vacations, I'm reading too much lately, but with vacations and out-of-town trips over the summer, he has missed some time along the way, not keeping up to the program as hoped. He is a few weeks into on-ice practice now and has planned to get back on track through the month of September, simultaneous to the start of the season. Is it an acceptable approach to get a head start on the season, or is there another recommended path? So, I love the enthusiasm and willingness to get right back at it, but you said 2 very contradictory things. He started the in-season program. He started the in-season. Can he continue to do the off-season program? No. That's just simply an NO, regardless of context. That's the thing. Lots of times, answers in nutrition and strength and conditioning begin with, it depends, because you're thinking about a context. But when someone wants to run an off-season program in the in-season, context is out the window and it's an absolute no. There's textbooks in sports science that are this thick dedicated to yearly periodization and scheduling structure of training, and are completely different off-season to in-season. Off-season, the primary focus is physical development. In-season, the primary focus is physical expression. Programming these two things are very different, because for physical development, we're training at harder intensities for more sets and reps and a lot of training frequency, because we are developing the body, because we don't have to worry about recovering for optimal physical expression out in the ice. Whereas the in-season, we need to be very careful about our set and rep scheme and how we're setting up our rest periods and how we're scheduling the overall structure of not just the acute weekly program, but the big picture entire in-season. This is about physical expression, which emphasizes maximum recovery. So where the off-season is about physical development, we're really trashing the body to get crazy results as fast as possible. But in the in-season, you don't have that luxury, because you can't go to practice with sore legs. You can't expect to play a game at your optimum potential with an exhausted nervous system. You can't do these things. So it's like, in sports science, in that respect, is kind of like a light switch. You're either in season or you're off season. So when you ask me what would be my approach for you at this point in time, you're asking me, is this an acceptable approach? I would say that, I just lost my questions here. I would say definitely not. You're going to want to start a in-season program as soon as possible. Next question here. You've indicated taking sodium bicarbonate before games to neutralize acid. You recommended 0.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. Question is, can we use potassium bicarbonate instead in order to avoid huge intakes of sodium above recommended daily levels to avoid blood pressure issues and the drawing of water from muscle tissue, which would be needed to dilute sodium in the small intestine? Would this still be effective? Would this possibly address the electrolyte issue for potassium? What dosage would you recommend? So I've got a few things to say here. You were saying, avoid a huge sodium intake above daily levels to avoid blood pressure issues. So the first thing I would say there is sodium and blood pressure issues is a myth that died a long time ago in medical literature, because it's genetically predetermined. So when you say sodium raises blood pressure, that's not a paintbrush you can paint on everybody. That's genetically predetermined. So if you're somebody who is genetically predisposed to elevations in blood pressure from sodium intake, then of course talk to your doctor. Sodium intake is something that's pretty dangerous for you. But that's a very small subset of the population. The reason why that myth kind of began is because there were outliers in studies throwing off the normative data of it all. So if you've got 10 people who don't respond to it, and then one person that responds crazy to it, it actually brings the average way up and has it perceived to be an issue for everybody when it was really just an issue for one person. So the first thing I would say is ensure that sodium is even a blood pressure problem for you, because it's actually a small subset of the population that that issue is for. The second thing I would say is, you said drawing water from muscle tissue that would be needed to dilute sodium in the small intestine. So this is a part of proper digestive biochemistry, but you're almost wording this as a way in which we're taking water away from the muscle cell and towards the small intestine, which would negate performance benefits. If that was the case, then we wouldn't see so many performance benefits in the literature from sodium bicarbonate. That transportation process happens A-OK. That we would not see the neutralization of pH levels within muscle tissue if what you're saying occurred. So the evidence definitely goes against that. So sodium bicarbonate is absolutely easily digestible and is something within the correct dose, of course, not if you go crazy. But it's something that is quite easily digestible and will create a performance benefit. So I wouldn't be overthinking the transporter proteins and catalysms that are required for the carrying of sodium across the intestinal wall into circulation, because if that was an issue, then we wouldn't see the performance benefits in the literature, right? The third thing I would say here is you asked me about potassium bicarbonate. I've never seen literature on potassium bicarbonate. So I would not want to recommend something that hasn't been demonstrated effective or safe. And in fact, potassium can be quite unsafe. There's a reason why you can't just go buy a potassium supplement in pure form. It's been demonstrated to create cardiac events. And I'm quite sure, actually, you can't even legally have a potassium pill with more than 100 milligrams in it. Medically, you can get it from certain medical providers, such as Thorne and Designs for Health, and they'll have it even at 99 milligrams, so at the absolute max, because it's been demonstrated if you have too much potassium, especially on an empty stomach, you can create a cardiac event. So for these 3 reasons already, I'd kind of, I think 4 actually, I would already say definitely not. But I would also even create the theoretical metabolic pathway that it wouldn't even be beneficial for performance, right? Because if you had, let's say you had a dead frog in front of you, and we sprinkled some salt on the dead frog's legs, the legs would start to twitch. This is seen in Japanese cuisine as well. They'll pour soy sauce on tentacles, and the tentacles will start to move because soy sauce is very high in sodium. The reason that dead frog's legs are twitching is because sodium causes muscular contraction. But potassium, if you were to sprinkle some potassium on the legs of that dead frog, from contraction, it would begin to relax. And that's because sodium causes muscular contraction, potassium causes muscular relaxation. So if you're using this potassium front load pre-game, I think that would cause too much relaxation and not enough potential for high velocity contraction, where we're kind of getting the opposite of effect. You want only some potassium in there. You'll see this actually in NFL games. You'll see athletes on the side of the field eating bananas, and they're having the banana because it's high in potassium to prevent hamstring cramps, which are common in football. But it's a very small amount of potassium, and they're not overtaking it to the point where it's causing too much relaxation, because relaxation prevents cramps, but too much relaxation means we're opposing high velocity contraction. So because blood pressure issues are genetically predetermined, because there isn't an issue with the small intestine carrier or catalysms that happen there, because potassium bicarbonate hasn't been researched, because it causes relaxation and can lead to cardiac events if we have too much in one sitting, I would just simply still recommend sodium bicarbonate because we know it's effective and safe. But if you're this worried about it, don't even take it. That's what supplements are supplements. They have like a 2 to 5% effect at the absolute most. So it's not worth this kind of worry. I would just move toward, it looks like you're after conditioning effects here. So you would move towards other supplemental avenues for enhanced conditioning, okay? Hey Dan, I'm 14 years old and I want to know if I need to gain weight. If I'm 6'1" and my weight's around 160. If yes, what should be my goal? Thanks and have a good day, Alex. Alex, I hope you have a good day too. Now, let me give you a little bit of a hard time, okay? You're 6'1", you say you need to, do I need to gain weight? I want to rephrase your question because you should never gain weight. You should gain muscle, okay? Weight gain is something old school coaches say because they haven't picked up a sports science book in 20 years, right? They'll say, go to McDonald's, gain some weight, eat some candy, get chocolate bars in you, go get a 12-inch sub post-workout and get all that. Anybody can get on a weight gain diet. Go to McDonald's every single day. You'll gain weight. Is it going to make you a better hockey player? Absolutely not. What you want to get on is a functional muscle gaining diet, all right? Why? Because you can't contract fat tissue. It's not going to help you at all on the ice. You can think about fat on the athletic body just like carrying a backpack full of extra weight. You can't contract it, but it's still weighing you down. This means it's going to impact starting speed, it's going to impact acceleration, it's going to impact top speed, it's definitely going to bring down conditioning, it's certainly going to bring down agility. It's going to bring down basically everything. It doesn't improve shot power because you can't contract it. There's no velocity coming from there. I mean, the only argument that you could make is if I put on a bunch of fat, then I'm going to be hard to knock off the puck. And I'd be like, okay, cool. That kind of makes sense. You'd be harder to knock off the puck if you were heavier. There's no doubt there. The argument to that is you're probably never going to have the puck because you'd never get to the puck to begin with to be able to be in control, okay? And even if you had the puck, it's probably going to be taken off you by someone who's faster. So I would just reword, and I know you didn't mean that, but I want to use this teaching opportunity to reword how your brain thinks. We're looking to gain functional muscle tissue. So you want to gain muscle mass, because functional muscle mass will actually improve everything I just said. It will improve shot power. It will improve speed, agility, and conditioning. It will make you stronger on the puck. It'll definitely make you more injury resilient, because your strength training also strengthens your tendons and ligaments. There's a lot of really good things. So in respect to this question, you're 6'1" and you're 160. You and I were working one-on-one. Let's say this. My first goal for you would probably be to get around 185, all right? 185 at 6'1" is a good goal for you, because it's certainly not too bulky as to lose athleticism, but it's definitely enough muscle mass where it's going to create a game-changing effect on your performance out in the ice. It's going to be somewhere in that sweet spot. So I think a lean 185 would be a good goal for you, and I'd recommend utilizing the formulas and calculations that I provided on my Hockey Science Unleashed channel. It's a whiteboard video I did on muscle gaining strategy. I almost just said weight gain on muscle gaining strategies for hockey players, okay? So that's the approach I'd take. 185 would probably be my first goal for you, with the caveat that no one knows your body better than you. So you know how you feel out in the ice. I would probably bring you to 185 because I think that's very conservative. I think you would actually be faster and more conditioned and more agile at that weight, and then we could assess movement quality from there. If you wanted to go to 190, 195, I've got an athlete who just got signed to the NHL who feels great at 220. So it's everybody's body's different, but conservative is always the best way to go when working your way up the ladder. I wouldn't want your first goal to be B220. It would be 185, and then we'd assess performance metrics, and then we'd go up from there only if needed. What are some good pre-game and pre-practice meals? All right, so you'd be a lot better served by just checking out our content. Because I'm just standing here in Hockey HQ, right? I can only kind of spit science and numbers at you. But as far as pregame and pre-practice meals, we have full articles on this, on pregame and pre-practice meals if you've got it playing in the evening, or even if you're playing first thing in the morning. And in those articles, there's recipes, there's breakdowns, there's examples. If you go to our YouTube channel, the main hockey training YouTube channel, you can watch Kevin in his kitchen making stuff, recipes, providing everything for you. So you'd just be better served checking out those content outlets instead of listening to me talk about it here, because they're going to give you way better ideas and options of what to do. But you're essentially looking for high carb, high protein, low fat, low fiber. Stay within those metrics and you're going to be having that hockey specific meal. Next up, my 15-year-old plays AAA, and the practices and games are intense and tiring. Additionally, most practices include a dry land workout. He wants to become more athletic, faster, more mobile, more flexible, and more explosive. What would you suggest he do on his own at home to achieve those goals and still preserve the intensity and energy he needs for games and practices? Thank you. My son and I are both fans of your work. So thank you so much for checking out my work. That really means a lot to me. As far as your son goes, I mean, he's 15, he's AAA, so we're talking about a high-level player here, and his goals are awesome. He wants to be more athletic, faster, mobile, flexible, and explosive. So the whole gamut, right? So he sounds motivated, he sounds ready to rock. In this situation, I would recommend the new In-Season 21 program that I've been talking about throughout this video, and especially in that first question. The reason why is because he's AAA, so he's serious. He pre-qualifies as a serious athlete, which would put him into the in-season domination program. But then he's got practices and games and dry land workouts. So more than anything, he needs an adaptable schedule. And this year's program is 100% adaptable to any schedule. So it's not fixed. It's not like Monday, leg day, Tuesday, upper body, Wednesday, speed. It's 100% adaptable depending on what you got going on. So I would recommend getting on the in-season domination program for that reason alone, because of its adaptability, because his schedule, and he needs something really adaptable to what's going on. But beyond this, He wants to be more athletic, faster, mobile, flexible, explosive. I mean, more athletic, Bulletproof Armor Circuit, Accelerate Performance Session. Faster, Accelerate Performance Session, Explosive Strength Session. More mobile, Bulletproof Armor, Haki Yoga. More flexible, Bulletproof Armor, Haki Yoga. More explosive, Accelerate Performance Session, and Explosive Strength Session. So the scheduling of this year's program works perfect for him, but then every single one of his goals I've got to work out directly for in that program. So at the risk of sounding self-serving here, I think it's the perfect program for him. And not to mention, it's 100% at-home friendly. And you said, what would you suggest he do on his own at home to achieve these goals? Every single thing I just mentioned right there is at-home friendly. So you could do it all at home. So I can't recommend that program enough. It's like the program was designed for your kid. What should I do in season to get more conditioned? I'm running a mile right now, but I'm busy with school from 7 to 3. I've got practice on Tuesday and Thursday, so what should I do? Conditioning is interesting for hockey because conditioning, you're going to want to cover anaerobic and aerobic measures. You can think about if your legs are really burning and heavy out in the ice, then you've got an anaerobic problem. But if you're having trouble catching your breath in between shifts, then you've got an aerobic problem. That's why I've structured this year's in-season programming to cover both, all right? Your explosive strength work is covering your anaerobic work, and your Accelerate Performance session is covering your aerobic work. More specifically, if you look at the structure at which I created the explosive strength session, you're beginning each workout with 3 plyometric drills. And those 3 plyometric drills are actually in a tricep. So you're doing them back to back to back. This is important to care about because you're training power and power endurance. A lot of people think strength and power are the same things. They're definitely not. Strength is your absolute force capacity, whereas power is the rate at which you can produce force. For example, let's say you and I both have a 1 rep max deadlift of 400 pounds. We have this same 1 rep max, but you can deadlift it faster than me. That means you're more powerful than me, even though we have the same level of strength. Why? You did it faster. The rate at which you were able to produce the force necessary to lift up 400 pounds was faster than me, even though we had the same strength. So when you translate, okay, power is rate of force production. That is explosiveness. Your ability to recruit and contract more muscle fibers at once than the other players out in the ice is what allows you to be explosive because you're contracting more muscle fibers at once. That is power. Power is trainable. Yet, what a lot of people forget is you can also train power endurance so that you're not just explosive, but you're explosive all game long. Power is maximum velocity. Power endurance is your ability to maintain a high level of velocity. So the conditioning of explosiveness, they can be absolutely trained together. And that's why in season, when time demands are very strict due to travel, practices, games, I actually like to utilize plyometric trisets to get the job done for both. Because plyometric exercises, explosive, they train power. But when moving from one to the next, let's say vertical power, horizontal power, lateral power, you're now training power endurance because you are doing it in a sequence of 3 rather than just by itself with some long rest period. Power and power endurance, or all aspects of anaerobic conditioning, are coming from your explosive strength work. Whereas in your Accelerate Performance session, as I discussed previously, it's utilizing the cardio acceleration method, which integrates sport-specific and exercise-based movements during your rest periods in an aerobic intensity. So we're attacking both aerobic power and aerobic capacity in your Accelerate Performance session. So explosive strength, anaerobic power, anaerobic capacity. Your Accelerate Performance session, aerobic power, aerobic capacity. You marry the two, and you have a completely conditioned hockey player. So when you ask me what should you do in season for conditioning, you tell me right now that you're running a mile a day. That's one of the last things I'd recommend, my man. I'm sorry to say that, but there's a big difference between general fitness and specific fitness. If you run for a mile per day, you'll improve health measures and general fitness measures, but it won't make you a better hockey player. Why? Because you're running at a non-specific intensity for a non-specific adaptation. That'll burn calories. Don't get me wrong, it's exercise, but it's not hockey training. Exercise and hockey training are two different things, okay? So when you transition, I'm running a mile a day. That'll get you better at running a mile a day. But when you do hockey-specific stuff at specific intensities and frequencies, that's when you start to actually create a bridge between your dry land training and the actual effects that you're going to see in an on-ice setting. So for complete conditioning, man, I'd recommend joining the in-season program. Or if you're savvy with strength and conditioning, I'm not sure, I just get pure questions here. I don't get information from, I don't even know who's asking these questions. So if you're savvy with strength and conditioning, then I recommend plyometric trisets twice per week using different power highways, and then an accelerate performance session once per week. How often should you do weight training for legs during the season? What should that program look like? Reps, sets, frequency, and exercises. I have a York sled style pro quality leg press machine in my home gym. I'd like to center all my workouts around this machine. Your thoughts, coach? I mean, too much goes into program design to answer this in the air. You know what I'm saying? I mean, for example, I have a course. It's called the Hockey Training Specialist Certification Course. It's the only course in the world where I specialize coaches in how to design hockey-specific training programs. It's 6 months long and many hours per week of dedicated study just to learn how to design a hockey program. So you can kind of imagine my brain, when someone asks me a question, my brain's like vroom, vroom, because there's so much context and data to go through. And a lot of people think that they can just design a program because they did Monday push leg pull and I saw these exercises were made for hockey on YouTube. It doesn't work that way. If it was that simple, then my certification course wouldn't exist, and the world of sports science wouldn't really exist because program design would be super easy. But it's not. The way in which you set your microcycles, your mesocycles, and your macrocycles, which is your weekly, monthly, and yearly structure, there's tons of science behind this stuff, man. So I gotta unfortunately answer this with like a broad paintbrush because I can't design a whole program for you in thin air with no context. So I'll just answer your first question. How often should you do weight training for legs during the in-season? Even that's kind of hard to answer because at what intensity? Power, strength, hypertrophy, structural balance, at home, in the gym. There's so much going on here. But I would say 1 to 2 times per week. Usually 2 times, and they would be hit during 2 total body sessions, one with a squat emphasis, the next with a hinge emphasis. So squat being like, say, a front squat, but then your next would be a hinge type of Romanian deadlift type of deal to ensure you're getting anterior and posterior development of the lower body. So once per week if it's a more complete leg session, twice per week if it is a squat versus hinge emphasis. That's resistance training only because you're still going to use your legs in what I would do for conditioning, aerobic, anaerobic work, even the mobility stuff. So I'm sorry, you probably wanted a better answer than this, dude, but maybe you don't realize it. I would actually be doing you a disservice if I tried to write a program in thin air. Actually, that would be your first clue that I have no idea what I'm doing if I tried to design a program in thin air for you right now. Because if someone pretends that they can design a program in thin air off of that, then that's a charlatan who knows general fitness and not hockey-specific training. Next question, will you have an in-season 2021 training program geared for youth players? 100%. You're gonna have a couple of options. If your youth athlete is less than 10 years old, then they will go to the Hockey Training TV app in-season program. Or if your youth athlete is from 10 to 14 years old, then they will do the in-season Youth 21 program. So no matter how young your athlete is, I 100% recommend they get on an in-season program so they can really reach their potential. But more importantly, just stay healthy throughout the season as well. Not getting injured, having more fun because they're scoring more goals and not getting exhausted, all of that good stuff. So less than 10 years old, Hockey Training TV in-season program, 10 to 14 in-season Youth 21 program. Now, if they're 15 and above, I put them in the adult category, and they do the in-season domination system. My physio identified me as hypermobile. Is there anything I should be switching up in how I train because of this? Hypermobile. So when it comes to hypermobility, for people who may not be familiar, it's when you are very mobile. So it's what most people first learn as double jointed, right? Like my thumb's not supposed to bend back that far, right? I can create basically a right angle with it, and I can actually push it even more if I apply pressure. My thumb's really weird. Both of them do that. This one will do, that one's almost even worse. That's what's known as hypermobility, in that you have the mobility to exceed normal anatomical ranges of motion. So you're asking me here, should I be switching up how I train because of this? Yeah, yes and no. I guess I would say two things. The first thing would be a good program is going to prioritize strength and stability anyways. And strength and stability is how you stabilize ranges of motion so that you don't get injured. So even if you are hypermobile, a good program will create structural balance and no strength asymmetries so that you can stabilize that hypermobility so that you don't get injured. So in that sense, how I would design your training program wouldn't change. I think the only thing that would change is not even a change, but more of a mental note, is that if you and I were working one-on-one, I would want you to do the range of motion for the exercise and not the range of motion that you're capable of. For example, some people, and you'll see this, they lock out their elbows, and mine doesn't do it, like I've just got a straight arm, right? But some people, when they lock out their elbow, it's totally hyperextended. Like, it's like exorcism stuff. It's totally bent the other way. If someone were to be heavy bench pressing and they did a full lockout with hyperextended elbows, that might not create an immediate injury. It might create an immediate injury, but it certainly is going to create a progressive injury. So if someone's doing that, even with push-ups, their elbows might not hurt today, but in a month, couple months, 3 months from now, your joint is creating a lot of inflammation because of that hypermobility, and you're essentially applying force that way on your elbow, which would be very producing inflammation over time and damaging connective tissue and asking a hinge joint to do more than what it's supposed to be doing. So I guess the two things I would say for you would be A, I wouldn't actually change your program design because strength and stability should already be in there. But B, you need to self-correct your hypomobility and that you don't overextend anything, that you follow exercise technique rather than follow the range of motion that you're capable of. Because if you do that, that's what's going to help keep you safe in the gym. Last question. My tryouts have started, and while I've made it past the first round, there's going to be some hard skates 6 times a week for the next month to narrow down the team. Man, that's a lot. How much should I be working out so I stay fresh and not burnt out? Dude, 6 times a week for a month. I mean, I work with NHL players and we don't do this. So that's pretty insane. But if you're training six times a week, hard skates, I would likely only be putting active recovery work in your plan. So I would put you on Bulletproof armor circuits. I'd put you on Haki Yoga. I'd still have you do the edge work routines. I'd have you doing specific warm-ups prior to your skates for sure. And that's a wrap, really. You'd be doing Haki Yoga, Bulletproof armor, edge work routines, warm-ups, and skill work. Skill work is, you can definitely still do your in-season stick handling prep, those type of sessions as well. So we would be incorporating all of those as a mode of active recovery, because we've seen in research that active recovery is actually superior to doing nothing at all for recovery due to the flushing effect. You're creating a flushing effect of putting new blood into working muscle tissues and getting old blood out. And getting all that old blood out brings things out of there that create delayed onset muscle soreness, such as inorganic phosphates, hydrogen ions, lactate buildup. We're going to go in there and regulate pH levels in the body, and that new blood is going to bring in things that we want. Amino acids supporting muscular repair, certain vitamins and minerals supporting connective tissue and bone repair. We're going to restock the muscle with glycogen for better energy next time. We're going to hydrate the muscle effectively and get electrolytes in there. There's a lot that can happen with active recovery. So I'd be implementing those sessions with you as a means of active recovery so that you can enter the ice 6 days a week at 100%, rather than start the week at 100% and then go 90, 80, 70, 60, 50. I don't want that to happen to you, and then you only recover on Sunday and then come back at 100%. We'd be doing active recovery throughout the week to fast track the rate at which you recover, because no one else is going to be doing this. So while everyone else is burning out, you're actually going to be staying up top and crushing them. But we'd be doing that. It would also play a huge role in preventing injury with that type of on ice frequency as well. And I think that's really what we would be doing, my man. So Haki Yoga, edge work sessions, your pregame warm-ups, Bulletproof armor circuits. We'd be hanging out in that zone each and every single week, and that would separate you from the pack. All right? But that was my last question of the day. I hope this was informative for you guys, and I hope that was a fun mistake that we made to send it to the whole list so that you can all enjoy the Q&A this time. As always, go to hockeytraining.com for more information. Make sure you check out the new in-season programs. You probably learned a lot about them in today's Q&A, and I'll see you on the inside. Let's go.